que eu tô chegando. Jongiana. That is Jongiana. It digs the wood. That's one of the pieces of wood that I had to chop off in my land. Figure should use it here with plants. Look at that. He likes it. The Jongiana likes the cedar plank too. It can't be that cedar that you put on the roof because that has a fire retardant of sorts sprayed on it. It has to be the raw stuff, the real deal. He likes it. Jongianas like to dry between waterings. They don't like to, stay there stuffy, wet. The reality is I can't get over how beautiful the harrisonianas are. It's lovely. I'm not a big fan of their scent. A lot of people like it. I don't like very sweet scents, just a few, like Walkeriana, Leopoldi. Just look how beautiful she is. Wow. Just gorgeous. I remember as a little kid going to orchid shows in Brazil that the orchid shows there are very different. The orchids are judged in a very different way than here in the United States. It's different than AOS judging as well as ribbon judging, which is different here, right? One from the other here in the United States. But in Brazil, in Brazilian orchid shows, they structure it a little differently. Often, the orchid shows are set for dates. They're not all in the spring or all in the summer, packed together like it kind of is here in the United States. In Brazil, the orchid shows tend to be around the time that the plants that were found in situ, in nature, around that season, or for some holiday reason. There are different reasons for dates for orchid shows in Brazil. But what is really different about it is that when you are there, you will see, for example, 20, 15, 20 sometimes different plants of the same species, let's say Cattleya harrisoniana, all competing with one another. So if you had Cattleya harrisoniana standard, tipo, or if you had Cattleya harrisoniana peloric, those two plants would be judged differently. And you would have first, second, and third place for each one of the subvarieties of the species. So you go into a Cattleya walkeriana orchid show, or Leopoldii orchid show, or Lelia purpurata, or Cattleya intermediate, or Cattleya labiata, and you have tons, sometimes hundreds of plants competing one against the other in varieties, in the varieties and subvarieties of each species. They judge hybrids too, but all separately, and they all get, so there's no like give a third place to a plant that doesn't deserve to get a prize. There's no gimmies. They're judged. We have 3 or 4 judges that judge it together, just like people do here, but it's more competitive, and it's all in good spirit. But it means something to have the champion or for the best species in an orchid show in Brazil, because they will compete against a lot of species. You won't have just 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 plants that deserve that award, and you must have one, of course, in its own subcategory or individual category before competing for, so only the first place orchids for each species, varieties of variety, would compete for the best species in the show. In a certain way, that's kind of what I do here. I have a bunch of orchids, many of the same species. I breed them and I bloom them to select the best ones for the next iteration of my breeding, next generation. And we've been doing that for a long time, 30 years. I started in orchids, I was 8 years old. It was a long time ago. It was in the 70s, late 70s in Brazil. But I feel like when a certain species blooms here, I have many, and I feel like I'm at an orchid show in Brazil. So I can compare and choose, and then the only difference is that they're all mine. They don't belong to different people like they do at the orchid show. But I kind of live in an orchid show that changes from species to species over time throughout the year. Look at that little division. It's tiny still, but look how beautiful that flower is. When it's an adult, it competes for first place here at my orchid show. The reality is that plant is just a back pseudobulb that are all dry already, that I cut and slowly made it into a plant. And it's tiny still. But it doesn't matter. Look at the genetics here. Genetics. Can't invent that. I guess you can over time if you keep on breeding. Over the years, a lot of different new incoming orchid growers and breeders. Some of them they are up front, some of them they hide and buy, or they go to my eBay store and buy to breed, and we don't mind it because when I sell something, I've already got 1 or 2 generations of breeding ahead of it in the can, so that I can stay away from allowing, in a way, competing against myself via other people. But I'm open, and people can start their breeding, and they should, because we always need the next generation. The only problem is that the more you breed, where's the space to put it all? So you get a little flask with 25 plants, and all of a sudden, something that occupied 3 inches and now occupies a few yards. 25 plants, a couple of yards of plants, and it's a lot. That's unrealistic. Where the hell is that going to be going? So I have to be very selective.